Please stand for the Chair of Thanet District Council.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, councillors and officers of the council and members of the press and public. I welcome you to the meeting of the council. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? If any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls while this meeting is in progress. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from councillors Braidwood, Bayford and Smith. Are there any other apologies for absence? Yeah. Thank you.
Bambridge, Rattican and Towney.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Apologies from Councillor Ara.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Smith is not here.
I did say Smith. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of Council held on the 10th of October 2024 be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do councillors agree? Thank you very much. Announcements. Firstly, I'd like to remind councillors of my reception after tonight's meeting. I hope you'll all be able to attend. And moving on, it's with great sadness that I have to inform councillors that former councillor McCastry has passed away. I would ask members to stand and pause for a minute's silence in respect of Councillor McCastry. Can we do that now, please? Thank you. Now I'm going to open the floor to councillors to give any tributes if they wish to do so. Would anyone like to say anything? Councillor Warray.
Thank you, Chair. Bert moved to London from St Lucia as a child, and he was both proud of his St Lucian heritage and he was also proud to be British. Bert served in Northern Ireland for the British Army and went on to become a councillor for the London Borough of Lambeth. He later moved to Margate with his wife Shemaine, and he became Thanet's first ever person of colour to become elected. I think elected in any office at all in Thanet, so it was quite an achievement and he was quite proud of that. I met Bert myself in the Winter Gardens at the count for the election of 2007. Talking to him, he got elected. I was a Birchington Parish Councillor at the time. It took me another 4 years before I came to this place. But we remain friends. And he's got a lovely family and everything like that, and he'd be sadly missed. I could obviously say a lot more, but this is something very personal to me and I'm sort of holding back a little bit. So God bless you, Bert.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I don't really want to add a huge amount more. Councillor Warren knew Councillor McCastry much better than I did. I came across Bert a number of times fighting elections in Cliftonville West, and we stood for Parliament against each other in 2015. And the thing I'll just say is he was always a lovely man, and he got politics. You could have a chat with him, and you could hammer each other at a debate and go for a pint afterwards, and it'd be absolutely fine. So really, really nice guy. Very sad to hear about his loss, and he will be missed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Petitions. No new petitions have been received in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 12. Questions from the press and public. There have been 7 questions received from the press and public in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 13. The time allowed for consideration of questions from the press and public shall not exceed 30 minutes. Please be as concise as possible. So, question from a member of the public regarding the Making Space for Nature report. I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Sabin Dawson. Please would you make your way to the microphone. Hello there.
Thanks. As we know, nature is in crisis. With plummeting insect numbers, massive habitat loss and a changing climate, we have many challenges ahead. The UK is one of the least biodiverse countries in the world, and Thanet is a particularly challenged area. I would therefore like to ask the Leader of the Council if the Council is fully prepared for the release of the Making Space for Nature report, the first ever local nature recovery strategy for Kent, when it's released in January, and which department, member or officer will be responsible for taking any actions that are recommended.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Ms Sabine Dawson, for your question. I think this is an important subject. We actually had a members' briefing on the biodiversity strategy earlier in the week, which I think everyone who attended found very worthwhile and interesting. The Kent and Medway Local Nature Recovery Strategy, LNRS, due to be published in January, is in fact a draft on which individuals and organisations across Kent could comment before the strategy is finalised. Kent County Council is the lead authority for the LNRS, and our council officers have been involved in a number of early engagement meetings with KCC as part of the role of the council as a supporting authority for the LNRS. The council's response to the consultation will involve a range of relevant departments.
Thank you. A question from a member of the public regarding Thanet's population and mass developments. I'm pleased to welcome Ms Brown. Would you please make your way to the microphone?
Good evening. My question is about St Crispin's Infants and St Saviour's Primary Schools in Westgate and the falling number of pupils. And this is information from KCC. The birth rate has fallen in Thanet steadily since 2017 and continues to decrease. The Kent published admission number for St Saviour's School in Westgate-on-Sea is to reduce from 96 to 64 from September 2025. And the PAN for St Crispin's Community Primary Infant School is to reduce from 90 to 60. How can Thanet District Council to continue to support Thanet's high housing number targets with this clear evidence that Thanet's population is shrinking instead of growing? Furthermore, if organisations like KCC are reducing services like education provision based on local population data, if Thanet District Council believes the population will grow from inward migration, how is KCC to provide adequate education provision for Thanet when our local council is approving planning for applications for mass developments for residents outside our district? And this is directed to the leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you for your question, Ms Brown. As we know, the pre-existing government methodology on housing numbers, which is what forms the basis of our local plan, is based on total population change in the district over the whole local plan period to 2031. This includes long-term trends in births, deaths, in-migration and out-migration. The figures are not based solely on Thanet birth rates or just on natural population change within the district, and it's not possible to make judgments about longer-term population projections based on short-term trends or single-year figures. The annual KCC Education Commissioning plans are based on different statistics to our local plan, and as it happens, I met the KCC Cabinet member and the officer responsible for planning school places in Thanet just last week. Their place planning is dynamic and adjusted annually, meaning that it will change to reflect planning consents as they're granted. And because children obviously don't enter school as soon as they are born, they have time to make appropriate adjustments to their plan. The local plan contains requirements for the provision of schools over the whole plan period and beyond, based on previous assessed requirements from KCC. The decisions on when to bring forward different elements of that provision are obviously dependent to some extent on short-term changes in school cohorts. The Council liaises with service providers as part of the local plan process and will be doing so again in relation to the new local plan to seek to ensure that services are provided in a timely way alongside new development. Personally, I find it quite interesting if new developments that have been completed are not placing stress on school places, because it seems to contradict the claim that the houses being built are being occupied by people arriving from outside the district, unless we're also to believe that none of them have children of school age.
Thank you. A question from a member of the public regarding Thanet's farmland and democracy. I'm pleased to welcome Mr Grover. Please, would you make your way to the microphone? Can't see Mr Grover. Is he here? No? Mr Grover will get an answer in writing. Next question from a member of the public regarding local cultural activities. I'm pleased to welcome Mr Bell. Please, would you make your way to the microphone? Hello there.
Good evening. This summer, TDC threatened legal action against Grass Cliftonville CIC and required us to remove railing banners promoting the Oval's charity events. These actions were taken under advertising restrictions that are poorly defined, selectively enforced by planning officers, and prohibitively expensive when applying for planning permission. Community events are vital for tourism, community engagement and venue sustainability. Can the Council confirm whether it plans to create and implement a policy establishing designated banner advertising spaces in high footfall areas to support organisations promoting such events? If not, what measures will the Council take to ensure community and charitable events can be effectively promoted without incurring prohibitive costs or risking enforcement actions? As a constructive suggestion, could the Council collaborate with organisations such as Visit Thanet to identify suitable locations and manage fair access to these spaces? This would provide an invaluable tool to support local cultural activities while reducing unsightly fly posting.
Thank you, Mr Bell. Well held together there. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Bell, for your question. We do currently have a local plan policy, QDO6, covering advertising. However, I can say to you that we will review the potential options to identify locations suitable for new advertising opportunities within the criteria of this local plan policy. Just for information, policy QDO6 reads as follows. Applications for advertisements will be considered in relation to their effects upon amenity and public safety. Regard will be paid to the surrounding location, manner of illumination if proposed, material composition, design and relationship to the land, building or structure to which they are to be affixed. Advertisements should not dominate but should be in balance with the character, townscape and architecture of the buildings on which they're situated. Regard should be had to the proximity of any listed buildings or structures and any impact to their setting. In and adjoining conservation areas, the Council will require that the design and siting of advertisements does not detract from and preferably makes a positive contribution to the character and or appearance of the area. Within that context, we'll have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. A question from a member of the public regarding the local plan. I'm pleased to welcome Mr Giddens. Would you please make your way to the microphone?
Good evening, members and Chairman. My question is to Councillor Everett as Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning. As a consequence of implementing the current local plan, Thanet is becoming a vast urban sprawl. It's the size of a city but unplanned and without essential infrastructure and services to support it. You are reviewing that plan. This will inevitably result in more agricultural land being allocated for development. Please can you outline the strategic approach you're taking, particularly the criteria for allocating sites and when residents will be informed of your proposals? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Giddens. In assessing sites for potential allocation in the local plan, a range of issues will need to be considered in line with government guidance, namely suitability in planning terms, availability, landowner support, and achievability, whether the site is considered to be capable of delivery within the planned period. Government guidance on how land and sites should be assessed is set out in the Planning Practice Guidance Note on Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment. Sites are also assessed under separate criteria as part of the sustainability appraisal process. In terms of timing, it's unlikely that the Council will be in a position to consult on these matters until the end of next year.
Thank you. A question from a member of the public regarding planning training. I'm pleased to welcome Mr Murray. Would you please make your way to the microphone?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to point out a technical problem. Those in the gallery, public gallery, cannot hear very much of the proceedings. The actual speakers are not working at all. There's no sound. So perhaps during the evening or later somebody else can repair that. My question is, I think, to Councillor Everett. Of those councillors who sit on TDC's planning committee, how many have had any external training on planning, e.g. by bodies such as the Planning Advisory Service or the Royal Town Planning Institute? These are recommended by the Local Government Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out the speaker problem. All I can do at this stage is ask councillors if they could face the public gallery as much as they can so that they can hear. I'm sorry about that. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Difficult to face the public gallery because I'm aware that that microphone doesn't work very well. I can only apologise for the state of the equipment, I'm afraid. I will speak up, however, for the benefit of the public. None of the members of the Planning Committee have had training from PAS or the RTPI arranged by this council. However, all Planning Committee members have received planning training delivered internally within the last year, and it is set out in the council's constitution that all councillors must have this planning training before they can sit on the committee. The council always seeks to ensure that members of its committees have the relevant training in order to make sound and cogent decisions. Notably, PAS's own guidance cites as best practice named authorities who appear to carry out their own training, like Thanet. And I was also pleased to see Thanet's planning committee arrangements identified by PAS as providing best practice in another aspect of their guidance.
Thank you. A question from a member of the public regarding affordable housing. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Solly. Would you please make your way to the... Oh, you have. Hello.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was here pretty early. Okay, so I've got 3 minutes. So thank you, Chairman. I wish to ask the leader the following question. Regarding Councillor Wing's comments on the Planning Committee on November the 26th, where affordable housing was in debate and some answers were not available from the officers, can the Council answer the question to how much affordable housing has been approved and delivered in the local plan period so far as a percentage, and how many affordable houses are planned in the local plan period? Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call Councillor Everett, just a gentle reminder to the whole room, I'm referred to as Chair and not Chairman. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Solly. The local plan has a policy that seeks 30% affordable housing to be delivered on qualifying sites. That is, sites of more than 10 dwellings, subject to viability in line with government guidance. So far, during the local plan period, to the end of the 2023-24 monitoring year, 1,182 affordable units have been delivered in the district, either via Section 106 agreements or directly by social housing providers, including the council itself. Housing completions over the same period total 5,398, which would mean that affordable dwellings comprise 22% of the total completions. However, it's important to note that the total completions figure provided includes non-qualifying sites, that the rate of affordable housing can vary substantially between sites, and that some affordable housing provision is not linked directly to Section 106 agreements. So we can't give you a completely accurate figure.
Thank you. That concludes the questions from the press and public. Now on to questions from councillors. 9 questions have been received from councillors in accordance with council procedure rule number 14. The time allowed for consideration of questions from councillors shall not exceed 30 minutes. Councillors, please will you be as concise as possible. First one then, a question from Councillor Wing regarding budgets. Councillor Wing.
Chair, I'll stay sat down so I'm closer to the mic for the people in the back.
Okay, thank you.
Question. The recent budget presented by the government will see the following changes to from April 2025. 1. The rate of employees' NI contributions will increase by 1.2% points to 15%. Secondly, the lowering of the secondary threshold, which will mean employers will start to pay NICs on their employees' earnings from 5,000 instead of the current 9,100. Thirdly, an increase of 6.7% in the national minimum wage from 11,044p to 12,021p, which I think we'd all agree is a good idea. What will be the financial impact of each of these changes for Thanet District Council in the next financial year in terms of the amount of additional money to be found and where this money will come from? I think the question is directed at Councillor Yates.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wing, for the question. I'll start off just by answering the financial impact of those 3 points and then go to where do we fund it at the end. So the impact to the employer's national insurance increasing to 15% will lead to a £175,000 increase to TDC. The government has fully committed to fund local authorities for any additional direct staff costs in relation to this. The impact of lowering the secondary threshold will be a £323,000 increase to TDC. Again, the government is fully committed to fund local authorities in relation to this. In relation to the national living wage increase, this will result in a £98,000 increase in staff costs. The Council is actively addressing this as part of the overall budget setting process. So one reason we have delayed presenting a draft budget this side of Christmas is the financial settlement this Council is due to receive is still being finalised. So in January we will be presenting the budget, which will show in detail exactly how we'll be funding any of those increases. Thanks.
Councillor Wing, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, but I'm quite prepared to take it in writing because I know there's a whole long list of questions behind. It's good to know that the government's part funding this, but have we as a council looked at or considered the impact to local businesses who are presently struggling? And do we have any idea of how many businesses or job losses may result as a consequence of these additional payments to local businesses who won't be who won't be benefit from additional funding from the government? I'll take that in writing, Chair.
Thank you, that's kind. Thank you very much. Next question from Councillor Worrow regarding council-owned farmland. Councillor Worrow.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move over a little bit so people can hear me. Can the leader please confirm that all residents in my ward, Garlinge, who are affected by the proposal to use council-owned farmland for non-farming purposes have been properly notified by letter as part of the consultation process?
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Worrow. I can confirm that we posted letters directly to 1,370 households in proximity to the proposed site of land between Shottendane Road and Caxton Road in Garlinge. Letters were posted on Thursday the 10th of October 2024. Addresses were drawn from a significantly larger area than that covered by a statutory planning consultation and included all addresses in the area between High Street, Garlinge and Hartsdown Road and between George V Avenue and Shottendane Road. Addresses to the south of Shottendane Road were also included. Details of the consultation were posted on Your Voice Thanet on the 9th of October and supported by an article posted on the Council's website. In addition, we posted a link on the Council's Facebook page on the 9th of October and again on the 24th of October. We also included in the Council's The Wave newsletter, which is read by more than 4,000 residents, on the 3rd of October and again on the 7th of November. The consultation is still live and closes on the 17th of December.
Councillor Worrow, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, that's interesting. Anne from Caxton Road tells me that she didn't receive a letter, and David from Fulham Avenue didn't receive a letter. But it's not just that. To add insult to injury, our local farmer, Farmer Tapp, who has been directly affected by this, has not received a letter either. It's outrageous.
Sorry, was there a question?
So the question is, Leader, why? Why?
I'm sorry, Councillor, why what?
OK, I'll spell it out. Why did our local farmer, Jonathan Tapp, not receive a consultation letter, considering that he's directly affected? Thank you. He lives in the area.
Over to you, Councillor Everett.
Well, I think those of us who benefit from the delivery service of the Royal Mail will be aware that there are certain erratic patterns in the postal service. I would be surprised if many people in Garland are not aware of this consultation exercise at this time. I think the Council has used its best efforts and done what is reasonable to contact as many people who are likely to be affected as possible. Obviously, if some letters didn't arrive, I'm sorry about that, but I can't really take responsibility for deliveries.
A question from Councillor Austin regarding remote attendance and proxy voting. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Green and Independent Group members wholeheartedly welcome the government's current consultation on enabling remote attendance and proxy voting at local authority meetings. We know from our experience during the pandemic that greater flexibility in modes of attendance helps us all fulfil our duties more easily, enabling better use of our time, making participation easier for members juggling work and family commitments, and reducing our carbon emissions. Enabling remote attendance and proxy voting for appropriate meetings would, in the longer term, also make it easier for us to recruit a wider and more representative range of councillor candidates to the benefit of this council and the communities we serve. Can the leader assure us that the council will be responding positively to the consultation, and that if the measures are approved, we will give full consideration to how we might best use the new flexibilities here in Thanet? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Austin. The answer is yes. I will elaborate a little bit for you, though. The Council will be responding positively to the consultation regarding remote attendance at meetings. We agree that councils should have the flexibility to make their own arrangements to best suit their individual circumstances. This doesn't mean that we would necessarily embrace complete flexibility, because there could be challenges in running fully hybrid meetings, but we think it should be a local choice. It will also need to reflect the technology that is available to the Council. However, we are not in favour of proxy voting. There are a host of potential issues with proxy voting, particularly regarding predetermination at regulatory committees. We will look carefully at any new legislation and any subsequent best practice guidance and consider what arrangements suit Thanet District Council best. Assuming there is flexibility in the legislation, these will ultimately be decisions for all councillors to make, as they will need to be incorporated into the Constitution.
Councillor Austin, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. May I send the supplementary question in writing, because it's a bit niche. It's about our efficiency priorities. Is that okay, Leader? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, a question from Councillor Pressland regarding biodiversity net gain. Councillor Pressland.
Thank you, Chair. As members may be aware, biodiversity net gain on all new builds is now a legal requirement from the 12th of February 2024 and for major projects, and April 2024 for small, new, medium builds. Please can the leader confirm how many developments so far in Thanet are now having to adhere to that criteria, and how planning is monitoring this practically on the ground, so the developers honour ongoing aftercare management to genuinely achieve the 10% higher level of biodiversity under these legal obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Councillor Pressland. Interesting question. Since the changes to the regulations were enacted for major and minor applications, 194 applications have been received, which could have been required to provide the 10% statutory net gain. However, the majority of these applications were exempt due to either being de minimis, as the area of habitat on the site is less than 25 square metres, retrospective, or self-build development. 36 planning applications of those submitted are required to provide 10% net gain, with the BNG metrics submitted. Only 4 have so far been approved, and they will be subject to the requirement for a biodiversity net gain plan to be submitted, outlining whether the BNG is provided on-site, off-site, or whether statutory credits are purchased. The Council has yet to receive any BNG plans as developments on these applications are yet to progress. We're also considering the need for a monitoring fee through planning obligations to ensure that the Council has sufficient resources to monitor when significant on-site biodiversity net gain is proposed, as well as monitoring new developments through the enforcement of planning conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Pressland, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Chair. My question is, well, thank you for the reply. However, although it is not a legal obligation, should we not use the same approach to trees lost in TDC land, as the current 2-for-1 tree loss approach is not fit for purpose? Please can the Cabinet look at using the software tools like Naturemetrics or Greenly, which are available and used by KCC, to ascertain a more balanced mitigation approach of biodiversity and CO2 values?
Councillor Everett.
I think you might get a written answer to that one, Councillor Preston. Thank you for the question.
Is that all right with you, Councillor Preston? Thank you. Next question from Councillor Scobie regarding minutes of full council meetings. Councillor Scobie.
Sorry, Councillor Everett, I think you're quite popular this evening. Does the leader believe that a change should be made to the minutes of full council meetings to record when a councillor leaves early?
Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Scobie. I am advised that council minutes usually reflect this information, and consequently no change is required to current practice in this regard. If this suggestion has arisen as a result of a failure to record such information at any earlier council meetings, I'd recommend an approach be made to Democratic Services requesting an amendment to the relevant minutes. I think we all understand that personal circumstances sometimes require individual councillors to leave early, but I think when a large number go missing, it would seem appropriate that a public record is kept in the interest of transparency.
Councillor Scobie, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Chair, and thank the leader for that question, that answer to the question. I'm intrigued to understand what would happen at a meeting if a large number did go missing, as happened at the last council meeting when I think on the benches opposite, I think there was no TIGs and half the Conservative group had left. If a meeting, a number of people left, would the meeting be in quorum in that sense?
Councillor Everett.
I have every confidence that the Labour majority group would have enough members present for the meeting to continue.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Manners regarding the Sports Pavilion in North Down Park. Councillor Manners.
Thank you, Chair. Since submitting the question, but almost simultaneously pressing the send button, the relevant TDC officer indicated that there might be meaningful activity on this matter. So with the Chair's permission, I'm happy to withdraw the question with a view to resubmission at the next council, when I'd hope to have substantive and positive news, rather than ask the portfolio holder to disclose potentially commercially sensitive information. That is, of course, unless the portfolio holder feels it appropriate to respond now. Thank you.
You absolutely have my permission, Councillor Manners. Thank you. Question from Councillor Cupp regarding housing targets. Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair. TDC fell short of meeting housing targets by 4%. 71% of housing applications have been achieved within the government's cut-off deadline. Can the leader confirm whether or not developments, such as the 200 properties earmarked for the deaf school site, go towards reducing our housing target figure of 17,140 houses? The council was short by 4%, so how many houses was that figure? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cupp, for your question. All local plan allocations and new developments with planning permissions, including windfall permissions, count towards meeting the Council's housing requirements. The 4% shortfall against the HDT 75% threshold represents 83 units. Councillor Cupp will be aware that the housing delivery target is taken as an average over the previous 3 years. And in fact, the figure of 71% that is quoted comes from the 2022 housing delivery test and looks backwards to 2019, albeit adjusted for COVID impacts. No housing delivery test results for 2023 have been published by the government. The local plan includes a step change increase in the annual housing target after 2021, which was introduced during examination, so the bar will be higher for later years. However, there are many factors that affect housing delivery, including market conditions, and most of them are not within the Council's control. The Council's own ambitious housing programme is helping to boost supply, including building new homes on Council land, but the rate of delivery is largely determined by the appetite of developers.
Councillor Carp, do you have a supplementary question?
The leader very kindly answered my supplementary in his response, so thank you. But I would accept a written response as well if you're giving them out.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor Davis regarding the local plan and affordable housing. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I've got an interesting point just come up. However, my question is to Councillor Whitehead. The current TDC local plan includes an objective that new developments include 30% affordable housing. Yet, even massive development projects regularly claim that they cannot achieve this figure despite their huge economies of scale. These residences are meant to be for the benefit of the local population and to offset the effects of a vastly inflated housing market that bears no relationship to local income levels. The Planning Committee on the 26th of the 11th, 24 approved a huge development of 1,600 houses which will destroy the fields surrounding Birchington, whilst allowing this developer to offer only approximately 50% of the Thanet stated policy objective. At said meeting, an officer stated they didn't know how many developments had achieved the 30% target. So my question to Councillor Whitehead is, how many developments have been approved since January 2022 which actually achieve our stated objective of 30%, and how many have been approved which do not?
Thank you. I'm not sure who's answering this. Is it?
Well, thank you, Councillor Davis. Although I like planning, I'm actually housing, so your question goes to Councillor Everett.
Well, Councillor Davis, thank you for the question, even though you didn't direct it at me. But it is a planning question, as I think we've probably already established through the questions throughout the meeting so far that I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning, so I will be answering it. Policy SP23 states that housing applications for more than 10 dwellings are required to provide 30% affordable housing unless meeting that requirement would demonstrably make the proposed development unviable. The Council does not simply accept the viability claims of the developer, it commissions an independent assessment of their calculation and uses that as a basis for decision making. Since the 1st of January 2022, the Council has approved 21 applications for more than 10 dwellings, either in outline or full planning permission, where the affordable housing requirement was triggered. Of these, 12 provided 30% on-site affordable housing, 3 provided a reduced amount of affordable housing, 4 provided a contribution to affordable housing in the area, and 2 did not provide affordable housing, as it was demonstrated with evidence that the developments would be unviable if it was provided. In the same period, the Planning Inspectorate approved 3 applications refused by the Council for more than 10 dwellings, 1 with 30% affordable, 1 with 15% affordable housing, and 1 with a contribution to affordable housing.
Councillor Davis, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you very much, and thank you, Leader, for your response. The reason I'd addressed it, incidentally, to Councillor Whitehead was because I was talking about affordable housing, so my apologies, that's where the lines crossed. Obviously, and demonstrably, failure to hit our targets, let's look at it from this council's point of view and the people we represent rather than the developer, failure to hit our targets cumulatively impacts on the amount of planning applications that we are going to need to approve to have any chance of reaching those. So there's a bit of a downward spiral if we're not careful here, or a race to the bottom certainly. This is particularly of concern without getting too much on the word peninsula, but because we have said previously that we believe Thanet should be a special case because of the fact that the land is so precious and our density is twice that of anywhere else.
Councillor Davis,
So my question,
I'm listening for a question.
sorry, my question is, given the announcement today about removing protection, maintaining the gaps between settlements, will this council commit to explore and take all necessary avenues necessary to challenge the loss of that protection to ensure that the green wedges between our settlements is protected, because that's set out in stone currently, and the MPPF-led revisions appear to have removed it, and it's vital that we fight for that to protect our people. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
I don't think that question's in order, to be honest with you, because it's not about affordable housing. It doesn't relate to the original question. What I will say is the MPPF was published about 12 o'clock this afternoon. I don't propose to debate what's in it tonight, because it's 81 pages long and I haven't had a chance to read it.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Fellows regarding Arlington Arcade. I call upon Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. With all the regeneration taking place in Thanet, can you tell us when this council will ever tackle or deal with the long-standing blight on Margate that is Arlington Arcade? I think that's probably for Councillor Duckworth.
Yes, it is. Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Chair. The Council owns the freehold of Arlington Arcade, with the head lease held by Metropolitan Property Realisations Limited. In the same way as Arlington House itself, our ability to take action under the lease is extremely limited. We do have a power to inspect, but it is for the leaseholder to decide about the use of the space, and the lease includes no powers for the council to force the leaseholder to take action to bring the arcade back into use. The council also has enforcement powers related to both building control and planning enforcement. However, neither regime provides the council with the power to compel the redevelopment of the site. We will continue to monitor the site to ensure that it remains properly hoarded and that it doesn't pose a risk to the public. The government has introduced new regulations linked to the Levelling Up Act 2023 to introduce high street retail auctions. We will be investigating these new powers to see if it gives us the ability to take any meaningful action to bring disused retail spaces back into use. The extent to which these new powers may or may not be appropriate for Arlington Arcade is yet unknown.
Councillor Fellows, supplementary.
I do, Chair. I had a couple, but I'm not sure if they actually relate, but I'll go with this one anyway.
One will do. One will do.
Okay, thanks. As part of the Margate Town deal, the Creative Land Trust received a large amount of money for purchasing and regenerating properties for the creative sector, often offering subsidised rents in return for a social and economic impact on the community. From their website, it says they've looked at 51 properties, offered on 4, and from what I gather, only purchased 1. But that update was in September, so things may have moved on. Does the Cabinet Member for Regeneration agree with me that that part of Margate would make a fantastic creative quarter, and also agree with me what a great impact that would have on our community? If so, can she take that idea back to the Creative Land Trust when she meets the trustees next, and report back to me with any response that she gets to that idea? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duckworth.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fellows, for your suggestion, and I will certainly make them aware. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the questions. So we have a notice of motion. 2 notices of motion have been received in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 3. The time allowed for consideration of motion shall not exceed 60 minutes. Would councillors please be as concise as possible? Notice of motion regarding incineration tax. Councillor Pressland, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Right. Just to clarify, the motion is to urge this council to support the local government authority's position that the 2028 incineration tax be redirected to a fossil fuel-based packaging instead, As members may be aware, the extended producer responsibility is now law. Whilst this is welcome, it does not really resolve consequences of packaging relating to the production and its end-of-life implications. If the incineration tax was instead redirected to a tax on fossil fuel-based packagings rather than on incineration, this would ratchet up the pressure on the packaging industry to change wholly to truly compostable packaging. It will begin to stop more plastic packaging being produced. As members may be aware, 2023 DEFRA figures show 70% of plastic packaging recycled in the UK, 14% goes abroad, 11% to landfill, 58% to incineration, though much ends up in the seas and soil profiles. Although incineration plants produce energy from this material, it effectively continues business as usual for the plastics industry. And I am sure members would agree this urgently needs to change. Ministers have mentioned the need to emphasise prevention of illness, which is encouraging. Reducing incineration through change to compostable packaging will stop phthalates going into the atmosphere from these facilities, known carcinogenic and endocrine disrupting chemicals. Redirecting an incineration tax onto plastic packaging, increasing the price of plastic packaging well above the cost of truly compostable alternatives like plant cellulose, matter bee, seaweed, mycelium, paper, hemp and others in research and development would change the dynamics within the industry and also importantly consumer behaviour. Whilst we also have to address the mechanisms for industrial composting with more biodigester facilities to effectively break this packaging down, and this can produce energy for council buildings whilst also producing valuable compost for the land. This could be a real win for councils, district and county, and should not impact the percentage accrued from the county from materials sent from Thanet, which the council accrue an income. I urge our council to support the local government authority preferred approach and send a letter of support. In addition, send a letter to government ministers to urge them to implement a tax on fossil fuel-based packaging above the cost of any truly compostable alternatives. As Devendra Michael, the climate minister for Fiji, expressed at the recent Global Plastics Conference, we have to close the plastic production tap to address the issue downstream. I urge members to support this motion. Thank you.
So for clarity, Councillor Pressland, I am going to invite you to read out the last 3 lines in the box in your motion. Starts with "this motion calls."
This motion calls on the Council to agree with the local government authorities' approach and write to the relevant government ministers calling on them to introduce a tax on the industries creating fossil fuel-based material in the first place.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Now, the controlling political group is entitled to reply. I call upon Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a few points before I get to the nitty-gritty of Councillor Preston's motion. The UK has actually participated in the scheme since January 2021. This is now being extended to energy from waste plants, essentially penalising those using ERFs, which is the energy for waste plants, with a tax to encourage more recycling. Should be noted that the LGA stated that the potential increase in cost would be if the levels of recycling remain stagnant. Obviously, we have plans in place to make sure this is not the case for TDC. The report also states that despite these proposals sending waste to energy from waste, plants would still be cheaper than landfill. Although far from ideal, incineration of waste and energy recovery is a better option than landfilling the waste. In terms of the impact on Thanet, this is currently minimal. As the collection authority, we do not actually have a responsibility of the disposal. This is KCC's part in the process, so would be an issue for them. A word of caution would be that the additional cost of impact of it could feasibly trickle down to us in the long run, although there has been no suggestion of this. Suggesting that producers carry some or all of this potential cost, much like the extended product responsibility scheme, would help tackle the issue of non-recyclable waste at source. Those things said, the Labour group is more than happy to support this motion, and we're more than happy to vote for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would councillors please note that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 3.7, if it's not agreed to debate the motion, it will fall, as only council can agree this motion. Can I have a proposer and seconder to debate the motion, please? Firstly, a proposer to debate the motion. Councillor Garner, thank you. And a seconder. Councillor Wing, thank you very much. Do councillors agree to debate the motion? Okay, let's go. Who's first? Oh, come on, it's Christmas. Who's first? I think we go straight to the vote then, wouldn't we? Yeah, straight to the vote. So, to agree with the motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. And those against? Any abstentions? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Notice of motion regarding the local plan. Councillor Everett.
Well, this is all going swimmingly, Chair, isn't it? I'll soon put a spoke in that. I'm going to read out what my motion says, first of all. Council notes that it does not have the power to revoke the local plan, recognises that revocation of the local plan would not protect agricultural land in Thanet, currently allocated for housing in any event, and would also have other unintended consequences, and endorses the approach on these matters contained in the response submitted by this council to the new government's consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. Now, I'm aware that in the agenda the word "the" appears twice in the motion. I'm taking that the council will be happy to delete that typo without arguing about it. As the council is aware, I've brought forward this motion to allow councillors to debate the local plan, which is clearly a matter of public interest, and because Cabinet could not recommend the motion previously tabled by Councillor Pugh and introduced here in October. This motion reflects the advice of our planning officers as contained in reports to Cabinet in both July and November. Notwithstanding the assertion in Councillor Pugh's motion, the fact that the Council does not have the power to revoke the local plan is not open to debate. Passing a motion to do so would have no effect, because it's not something we can decide. It is the case that the Council could ask the Deputy Prime Minister to revoke the local plan, but apart from the fact that the chances of her agreeing to do so are vanishingly small, it would not be a useful outcome in the sense that it would not protect our best and most versatile agricultural land. It would simply remove a whole range of other important policies. I listened to the large number of councillors who spoke on this issue under 20.1 at Cabinet, and all of them, I recognise, wish to protect agricultural land allocated for housing, but none of them explained how revoking the local plan would do this. I wrote to the previous Secretary of State last year asking him to intervene to call in applications on the agricultural land allocated for housing, and the reply which came back made clear that he would not do so, because as far as the then government was concerned, protecting that land was not a matter of national importance. Given that we have a local plan found to be sound at public examination and adopted in the last 5 years, using the housing number methodology that we were obliged by the government to use, it is time for all of us to be honest with the public about where we are. The major housing allocations that the then Conservative and Thanet Independent councillors voted to submit for examination in 2018 are not going to change now. The local plan will not be revoked, and neither is the planning application process a vehicle for changing the allocations within it. What we asked of government in the latest NPPF consultation was clarity about the status to be given to best and most versatile agricultural land in future local plans, because that did not exist in the previous version of the NPPF. We will continue to argue for this. Where we all agree, I think, is that development on brownfield land must be prioritised. It is important that the public knows that we have done everything we can to utilise such opportunities in the urban area. Tonight, therefore, I am tasking our planners with setting up an engagement exercise in which the public, as well as councillors, can identify brownfield sites in the urban areas that they believe could be developed for housing by the next iteration of the local plan. Officers will assess the sites suggested, comment on their suitability and availability, and where appropriate, endeavour to progress them. This will obviously include some sites in council ownership, such as car parks, and others that are already allocated. This is a constructive initiative, which I hope the whole council will embrace. In the meantime, let us face the facts about the current plan and adopt the motion before us. And I move it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Alban. Now, the controlling political group is entitled to reply. However, due to this being a motion from the controlling political group, the leader has offered the response to the leader of the opposition, and I have agreed. Therefore, I call upon Councillor Pugh.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I mean, wow, what an introduction to a motion, really. I look forward to the rest of this meeting and then a very awkward little Christmas party downstairs for all of us, really. We'll have to see how it goes. I thank the leader for his motion, for introducing this. I don't agree with it. I have the intention of moving an amendment to the motion, which I'm happy to read out either after my response to this or during the debate or whatever the process may be for that. I'm not going to hash over the motion I put to full council about revoking the local plan and the certain steps that we could take to move in a more positive direction for all of our residents. I'm delighted to hear that, and this isn't me trying to make a political point, I'm delighted to hear that the leader, in conjunction with officers, has decided to start up this kind of engagement exercise and group, because as I've been given examples at the 3 separate council meetings that I've attended, when I've waxed lyrically about how we're not building in the right places and we need to build in the town centres, and I've given firm examples of just council properties where we could partially redevelop them and provide housing, whether that be affordable housing or market sale housing in our town centres to help regenerate our high streets. So I'm delighted that that is something to come out of it. I'm not going to try and play political games about that, but I think if I hadn't included reference to that in my motion or waxed lyrically about it, it probably wouldn't be happening. The fact of the matter is that this motion has been brought forward in response to my local plan motion. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have submitted that motion. The motion itself is quite pointless and meaningless, if I'm honest, and we've already seen today announced through the changes to the NPPF and the Deputy Prime Minister briefing the press over the last week that actually this new government's intention is to build more homes everywhere, not less. I've seen information today from the NPPF that actually, as a district, whilst it looks that annually will only be a need to provide 2 houses more, because of the way that our housing delivery is staggered over certain many years and it picks up towards the end of the local plan, actually within these new rules, when we do have to revise our local plan, we could be delivering up to 500 homes more a year. Now, I've said it once and I'll say it again, and I don't think anyone can disagree with this. We are a unique case. We are a district that is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides. And I think we are one of probably the smallest districts in Kent. We have a sizable population for our size, but actually per square mile, we are generally quite, not overpopulated, but heavily populated. And unfortunately, I fear that not just because of this motion, but a consequence of what, as I've said before, previous governments and all previous administrations of all parties at this council have failed to recognise, is that if we're not careful, we'll end up becoming a completely urban district. We won't have any farmland left. We'll end up going up all the way to the former boundary of, sorry Chair, I will finish, to the former boundary of when the Isle of Thanet was actually an island, and that will be it. We won't have any green space or agricultural land left. I think the issue is not just with this local plan, with this motion, but the issue of homes across across the country is that it's not an issue about supply. It's not an issue of delivery, it's an issue of supply. There's currently across England almost 1 million consents for homes that have been given within the last 10 years that haven't been built. 2.7 consents have been given, but only 1.6 million have been built. So we're 1 million homes down on what we should be, and they've been consented. Now, there'll be a variety of reasons for why those houses haven't been delivered, but the fact remains is that the solution isn't for us to keep granting planning permission for more and more houses if we're not building enough housing that we've consented already. I'm not going to keep hashing over things. I don't think this motion is worth the paper that it's written on. I'm happy to move an amendment to the motion to actually make it a bit more worthwhile and give it a bit more teeth. But I'm happy to debate the motion. Let's see what happens.
Thank you. If you just hang on to your amendment just for a minute, we'll get to that. Thank you. Would councillors please note that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 3.7, if it's not agreed to debate the motion, it will fall, as only council can agree this motion. Can I have a proposer and seconder to debate the motion? First the proposer, please. Thank you, Councillor Alban. And a seconder to debate the motion. Thank you, Councillor Bright. Do councillors agree to debate the motion? Agree. Okay, let's go. Who'd like to speak? You're killing me. You want to go to your amendment now?
Fine, thank you, Chair. I mean, I've got to be honest, I think most of the Conservative groups spoke when it came to Cabinet. I've spoke about this at 3 separate occasions. If the point of this was for the leader to give an opportunity for everyone to speak on the local plan and the motion, the fact the Labour group have sat there quiet when the opportunity to debate, I think it speaks volumes, really, that, you know, there was no intention for any of them to say anything. Therefore, I would like to move my amendment to this motion. I appreciate, I don't want to overcomplicate this because of the way that we now are suddenly submitting amendments. So I'll try and make it quite clear how I want to amend the motion. So the motion reads, Council notes that it does not have the power to revoke the local plan, but then we insert, but can, if it chooses to do so, write to the Secretary of State to ask for the local plan to be revoked. End insertion. It also recognises that the revocation of the local plan, and then replace the word would with might, not protect agricultural land in Thanet currently allocated for housing, and then remove the words in any event, and replace would with could, also have other unintended consequences, and endorses the approach of these matters contained in the response submitted by this Council to the new government's consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. I appreciate that's a bit confusing, Chair, so if it's easier for me to read out my amendment to the motion in its entirety, I will do that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, great, brilliant. I think everyone's sick of hearing me speak, but I'll do it, it's fine. So my amendment is, Council notes that it does not have the power to revoke the local plan, but can, if it chooses to do so, write to the Secretary of State to ask for the local plan to be revoked. It also recognises that revocation of the local plan might not protect agricultural land in Thanet currently allocated for housing, and could also have other unintended consequences, and endorses the approach on these matters contained in the response submitted by this Council to the new government's consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. I move the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Carp, thank you. So we're going to debate the amendment. Anyone? Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand my Conservative colleagues' problems. I understand that, especially the areas that they represent, which has just had a large development approved, and they were supporting their residents, and I totally understand that. If you want to get rid of the local plan, you want to revocate the local plan, then the law says you've got to have one to take its place, and you haven't got one to take its place. So that negates the whole thing that you've just said. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't quite sure whether I was going to speak or not, but I've written something down so well. So the last couple of weeks have not been easy for me as a ward councillor. I'm so disappointed that the inappropriate application for 1,600 houses was approved against massive opposition. I've apologised to my residents for the failure to stop the planning application that will completely destroy my village. So any suggestions that this local plan protects our farmland certainly doesn't relate to anything that I can comprehend. I'm not sure anyone, apart from us that live in Birchland, understands our village and its beautiful surroundings, and it seems that only we can see the destruction that this local plan and that massive development is going to do. I've read things on social media that the Cabinet Member for Housing has said regarding not being able to, had little choice to approve the application for 1,600 houses because it was allocated land. So as far as I'm concerned, the local plan certainly hasn't protected lives and surrounded of any of my residents in my village.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the, and I want to be entirely non-political because there's a lot of schoolyard semantics go on here about who did what, said what and everything else. And again, this issue surpasses politics at this level. It may well be affected by the shenanigans that go on 70 miles up the line. However, surely we, representing the public and the people that put us in office, should simply be constantly exploring all ways to defend the environment that we live in, the whole culture of where we live. It's intrinsic to how we live that we're a semi-rural area. This place will disappear under concrete. It's already happening. You've only got to try and get through Nash Lane and so on. There's another 1,600. If we look at cumulatively how many applications are already approved, we're, I believe, way on the way to the incorrect objectively assessed number, which, wonder of wonders, after all the shenanigans, we come out too different. That doesn't mean that anybody has been listening, and I don't care the colour of the person that needs to be made to listen. It's our job, surely, to fight for what's right. Double the density of housing in this area, the very unique geographical issues we've got, and we're busy about who said what or whether, oh, well, we could do that. Nobody ever thought we could revoke the local plan, because if we could, we should have done it a long time ago. What we're saying is, as an authority, let's listen to the concerns of the people, let's do what we're here for, because, you know, having a majority on election day means that you have an advantage democratically. It doesn't give you the right just to impart and implement your ideas at the cost of listening to anybody else. And as opposition, I believe it's our right to be listened to and to make sure that we get a good democratic outcome. So let's drop the politics and start speaking for the people and find any vehicle appropriate and necessary to oppose any further overdevelopment. Because otherwise, the thing that people come here for ain't going to be here. Thank you.
Councillor Wells-Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to Councillor Pugh introducing this. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, continue, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, thank you. Listening to Councillor Pugh talking about not sure why this motion's here, it feels like this is a bit of a non-motion. Flies a little bit in the face of the last overview and scrutiny meeting where several members opposite, with fire and brimstone, were saying it's a democratic outrage if this does not come back to full council. And Councillor Everett has done the right thing, which is to bring it back and make sure there's discussion. And we're talking about changing the procedure here. And I have to be honest, for me, the only waste of time in terms of this whole process was Councillor Pugh bringing this motion in the first place. Because for me, it is bordering on irresponsible. We, as elected members, have a duty to be honest with people. And I don't believe, Chair, people realise the damage that they're doing in the community by promising things that cannot happen. There is a cabinet report from the officers in this council whose job it is, and we put them in those jobs and we trust them to do it, saying this cannot happen. This has gone through several meetings, but opposition members, even with that report in front of them, even with the facts in front of them, are still peddling this idea that that can happen, and it is dangerous. because people outside of this chamber see those messages. We all see the messages on social media, criticising the council, criticising officers, accusing all sorts of things. You are feeding into that, and it's irresponsible, Chair. I completely get the sentiment. Listening to Councillor Fellows, it isn't great, and you know, I can completely sympathise with you and the impact that's having on the community. But suggesting that anyone in this chamber is responsible for that, and suggesting that anyone in this chamber is voting one way or the other to make those things happen is irresponsible, and it needs to stop, Chair.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we're sort of stuck, I think. I mean, I accept that we cannot revoke the local plan. So maybe we should be debating how we can challenge our numbers. Because after the members' briefing, where the officers explained the mythical formula that gives us housing numbers which really have got no basis in the reality of our population growth, we do need to challenge the housing numbers. And the previous secretary has been written to by the leader of the council. So one of the first things I would expect to happen is that the leader of the council actually writes to the present secretary to ask that question. For me, you know, I come from a simple sporting background. I worked with kids. You set smart targets you can achieve. And what we've been given as a council, and what lots of councils have been given up and down the road, they're not smart targets. If we don't deliver our annual allowance, we then have to accept planning applications from bits of land that are not in the local plan. None of this is fair, and it all seems to be loaded in favour of developers. You know, the Birchington application was approved, the housing numbers, the affordable housing numbers were reduced, and the developer is only going to make 87 million. You know, it's not loaded in favour of what we actually need in Thanet. Listening to the biodiversity officer on Monday, it's, you know, the horror of additional houses with no additional infrastructure, or infrastructure that's stuffed into one side of our peninsula. You know, I think the issue is that local councils are not challenging whatever government is in power. And, you know, I'm not making this about Labour or Tory or anything. We just need to stand up for our communities. As a group, this shouldn't be a political thing. This should be every single one of us in this room agreeing that we are building too many houses of the wrong type and in the wrong place.
Just to say, Councillor Orban, I'm not calling you because you've already spoken, so I won't be calling you again. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Right, firstly, I'm not a great speaker. I'm a bit of a layman, not a career politician, and yeah, I always go by the method of the... they say the pen's mightier than the sword, but I'm all about the shovel's mightier than all of it. I just like to get on with it. So I became a councillor to actually represent the community I live in, and the community is Westgate, and they are facing a massive development. It's going to be built on agricultural farmland, and a large majority of those residents are not happy for that to happen. And when people say you can't revoke the local plan, it's like we've not even given it a chance. I mean, I've got a list here. Again, I'm not a career politician. Someone's probably read up far better than this, but we've got Tandrit District Council, we've got West Berkshire Council, Lynchfield Council, Mold Valley District Council. They've all made attempts to actually go ahead, write to Secretary of State, to either revoke the actual local plan or actually get a review. And I just can't see why we can't even just entertain that thought. We had our leader actually go and put that forward, and it's been shot down. There wasn't even a chance of a debate. So it just got pushed to Cabinet, where it's decided by the View, which ironically, that's what... no, I won't get political. But, you know, it was decided by the View, and no one ever got a chance. So, I mean, I will continue to still fight for what I feel is right for residents' community. But I really think if you're asking and arguing about the costs, the implications, I personally feel that the residents of Thanet, who are screaming about the lack of infrastructure, the fact that we're going to have too many houses built, and the fact that it's even been proven that we can't even make 30% on some of these houses, which are affordable, and there's a massive argument about what is affordable. I mean, I won't be able to afford a house in my time. Yeah, I think residents would really appreciate the fact that we push it. We actually take the gamble. Again, you know, I've probably spoken out of line, but that's just how I feel strongly. I just feel ashamed that we couldn't even debate a motion that was put forward, whether you want to say it's political point scoring or not. But for me, this isn't. This is just from passion about the fact that my community, the residents in my ward, care about the fact that agricultural farmland's been built on, and there'll be no benefit of those housing to that town at all. There just won't be. So, thank you, Chair, and thank you.
Point of order, please, Chair.
Oh, yeah.
May I make a point of order, please? We haven't debated and agreed the amendments to the motion yet, but we appear to be debating a substantive motion. But we haven't actually debated the amendments.
Well, we believe we're debating the amendment. That's why I'm not allowing Councillor Alban to speak, because the original motion was out, nobody wanted to speak. We went to Councillor Pugh's amendment, and then Councillor Alban was the first to speak on the amendment. Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, just to remind you, you're speaking on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. There have been a huge number of meetings and postings and discussions focusing on the idea of fighting for residents or standing up for residents. And the one thing that all of those statements have in common is that they aren't actually giving any respect to residents whatsoever. Because respecting residents requires telling them the truth. It means dealing with really difficult and really challenging situations and being brave enough to face them, even if you get criticism, and far worse than criticism, bluntly. The realities of what we have here, as much as people don't want to talk about it on the other side, is that these housing allocations were agreed in 2018. In 2018, a decision was made to have housing in particular places, including Birchington. And members opposite spoke in favour of that. Previous members spoke in favour of that also. Other members said that it would never happen, so it didn't matter, even though officer advice clearly stated that once it was allocated, it was allocated. And now 6 years forward, we have a concerted attempt to blame a Labour administration that is picking up the pieces from that for a housing allocation that was made 6 years ago. That isn't standing up for residents. That isn't showing residents any respect whatsoever, because they need to know what was agreed then and what is therefore happening now. Because the only way that people can understand and process situations is if they are given the facts to do so. The reality is, going back to the initial brownfield point, all brownfield has been looked at. I welcome the suggestion that we are now going to look into a new brownfield programme in order to allow residents to participate in that. But these allocations would not have been made if brownfield were available. We cannot revoke the plan that we have now without removing all of the protections that go with it. The green spaces that we have protected would no longer be protected. The housing allocations that we have would still be there. You can't keep pretending that this isn't the reality. I don't care if people vote for me or not, as long as I know I have told the truth. And I know I have told the truth. Everyone in this room needs to be able to say the same thing. Thank you.
Councillor Bright. Front row.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't support the amendment. And I would just like to
reference Councillor Scott, because Councillor Scott, nothing you said, as far as I was aware, was out of order in any way. And I completely understand that you are, as you were in 2018, standing up for your residents. I'm going to begin my point really by quoting an ex-leader of the council, and I can guarantee that it will be the only time I will ever quote a member of UKIP in a positive light. He said in the debate on the submission of the local plan in 2018 that there are too many councillors in this chamber who will not listen to professional advice and would rather listen to their own personal and private beliefs. And I think that stands today as much as it did then. Because 6 years later, I think those words would haunt some of the, or are haunting some of the members opposite, because during this debate, I've yet to hear a single rational reason as to why on earth we would seek to revoke our local plan. Consider it provides the guide rails for our economy, our infrastructure, our environment, biodiversity, leisure, retail facilities, open spaces, heritage and conservation areas. And yes, it does give us direction as to how we'll meet our housing needs, which is what we're really discussing here. I understand that members dispute the housing number of 17,410, but this housing number was arrived at via a robust and objective methodology as set out in the inspector's report. You might not like it, but that's what it was. I understand that members don't like seeing the development on farmland, but much of the farmland development is down to a choice made by the Conservative administration in 2018. Yeah? This was a choice between the officer recommendation at the time, which was to create a mixed-use site at the site of the former Manston airfield, or to reserve it solely for aviation. Sorry,
Yep, let's hear it.
Manston Airport was never allocated in the local plan. It was never taken into the local plan, and in fact, if I can finish, in 20.
No, I'm going to stop you, Councillor Davis. No, I'm going to stop you. It's not a point of order, please.
The misleading information as to whether Manston was in the local plan.
It's not a point of order.
There is no building anywhere else as a result of Manston.
No, it's not a point of order. Councillor Bright, carry on, please.
Thank you, Chair. So there were two recommendations that went to Cabinet in 2018. Option one, which was the recommended motion, had some housing on the Manston airfield. It was a mixed-use site. Option two, which was not the recommendation, was to put all of the housing on Westgate and Birchington agricultural land. That is in the minutes, it is in the reports of the time, and it is captured on the YouTube recording of the meeting. The Conservative administration chose option two against officer advice. Right? That's fact. It's there, it's on video. I suggest you watch it. I've spent far too much time watching it, Councillor Davis. And it was a choice that the then leader of the council was proud to have made, because his members and those of the Thanet independent councillors had been elected on a platform of bringing back aviation to Manston. I am going to continue because I was interrupted. Of bringing back aviation to Manston, and that was their priority. Fair enough. You made a choice. It was the choice you chose to make. And that's why I was so shocked when at last month's Cabinet meeting, the opposition Cabinet all lined up, except one, by the way, all lined up to speak so passionately about how terrible the plan is, despite four of them voting in favour of it in the first place, and the rest obviously not feeling strongly enough at the time to vote against it, because they all abstained. I said then, and I said it at the Cabinet meeting, and I say it again, politics is about making choices, and in going against officer recommendations in 2018, you made a choice that you now regret. Own it. That's all. I think we all just need to own the choices we make. I will happily own the choice that I make, but you need to own those. That regret doesn't change the facts that we need a local plan to protect our district. It is a fact that we cannot unilaterally revoke our local plan. It is a fact that we cannot unallocate agricultural land. It is also a fact that lots of young people up and down this country cannot afford a home of their own. and they are staying in their parents' bedrooms, in their childhood bedrooms, and they want somewhere to live. This is a national problem, not a Thanet problem. There is nothing in the local plan that says all Thanet housing has to be for Thanet residents.
Councillor Christian, I'm going to have to own my time, I'm afraid. and
Own your
ask you to wrap
time,
up.
Chair. You're more than welcome to it, but I'm against the amendment and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair. I don't even know where to start, to be honest with you. I firstly want to just clarify a point that Councillor Albon said in relation to revoking the local plan. We're obviously debating the amendment that got put forward by this group, which was, as has been said quite often, for that transparency to be put in place. So I think it is right for us to put into the motion that there is, if the council wishes to do so, the opportunity to write to the Secretary of State to ask for the local plan to be revoked. We're not in that motion. We're not asking them to do that. We're just stating that there is the option to do that, as has often been said by the councillors opposite, that it needs to be transparent. That is a transparent sentence because it is within the power of the council to be able to do that, to seek that from the Secretary of State. I think it is very clear that this subject is incredibly emotive, and we all are hearing different things from residents, and we all are here to represent our residents. And I think that absolutely we all should be able to take on board the decisions that we've made. And I do believe that we have taken our decisions that we made on board by making sure that the motion that was brought forward under Councillor Pugh didn't mention any party, didn't mention any kind of political sway within it, because I always say this whenever this conversation or debate gets mentioned. This issue is bigger than any of us local parties. This should be for all of us to ensure that we come together as a council, because I honestly believe that there would be headlines almost if actually there was something voted on by the Green Party, the Independents, Labour and the Conservatives together, that we want to look at something around the local plan, because together we are all working for residents. In 2020, I believe it was, when the local plan draft was accepted by council, I, along with some of my colleagues abstained, but I voted against the local plan because I did not believe it was right and I did not believe it was fit for purpose. And I still believe that today. To conclude, Chair, I just want to say that I do hope that, for the sake of transparency, as the members opposite have said, they support the amendment that has been put into the motion, because I think it's important to be able to note that the option is still there for the council to write to the Secretary of State to revoke the local plan and at least try. Thank you.
Perfectly timed, Councillor Cupp. Thank you very much. I'm going to take just two more speakers before we move on. Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. Both Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Bright have mentioned the meeting July 19th, 2018. I am one of the few people who was actually at that meeting. There were 31 councillors who voted for the local plan to go forward, of whom 5 are currently members of this council. 4 are members of the Conservative group and 1 is a member of the Independent group. 21 voted against, of which there were 2 who are currently councillors. I am the only one who's actually in the chamber this evening because one of the other person is not able to attend. 4 people didn't attend for whatever reason. There were no abstentions at all. So for people to say when they voted, they didn't know what they were voting for, they weren't quite sure, it was perfectly clear on that night. We were told, if you vote for this allocation to be moved to farmland, then it will be in the local plan, you will not be able to backtrack on it. So I find it quite hypocritical of people who actually voted for that to go through to stand up here and say we should revoke it. You knew what you were voting for. Don't tell us you were misled in any way. Those of us who voted against it were perfectly clear. We understood. It was debated, a very long debate from what I can remember. And as I say, 21 of the councillors at that time voted against, including myself. And I just want to say that I don't support the amendment. We can't revoke the local plan. We were told time and again, once that's in situ until the next local plan is voted through. So I can't support the amendment. I'm going to support the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we go round in circles on this, but I am still not hearing from members opposite how revoking the local plan, asking the Secretary of State to revoke the local plan, would have any effect on the agricultural allocations for housing. And I think they need to be reminded of what the officers have told us about this. In the unlikely event that the Secretary of State decided to revoke a local plan, the Council would have to rely on the NPPF and other government guidance in making decisions on planning applications. Not only would this entail the loss of a sufficient housing land supply for the plan period, but it would also remove other key local plan policies as well, relating to minimum internal space standards for new housing and water efficiency standards, national standards implemented through policy, affordable housing, green wedges, agricultural land, support for social infrastructure, contributions to birdwise to meet the requirements of the Habitats Regulation, protection of important employment sites, etc., as well as a range of other Thanet-specific policies not addressed in the NPPF. It would also remove the policy basis for the Council's supplementary planning documents, such as the Landscape Character Assessment. The government's standard methodology for housing requirements would still be a key material consideration in dealing with planning applications for housing. This means that the Council would still be vulnerable to planning appeals if it refused applications for houses on sites it considered to be unsuitable or overdeveloped. Significant weight would still be given to the standard methodology for calculating the housing numbers for Thanet. It's perfectly clear from what the officers have told us that this issue of revoking the local plan or asking for the local plan to be revoked is a complete and utter red herring and has been since it was introduced by Roger Gale during the election campaign. It is a diversion. It would achieve nothing. I go back to the 2015 election when there was a local plan in draft which had 12,500 new homes in it. The Conservatives and UKIP campaigned against that and said they would reduce the number. UKIP won the election, the Conservatives eventually assumed control. What happened to the housing numbers? They went up to 17,500. They could not deliver what they told the electorate they were going to deliver. And it wasn't actually their fault, it was the government, its policy. We do not, as a local council, have the right to vary those numbers. You can pretend until you're blue in the face that you do, but we don't. This administration will tell the truth, and I do not support the amendment. The amendment is weak words, offers nothing, suggests it might protect agricultural housing allocations and agricultural land. What a load of rubbish. The whole council knows it's rubbish, and it should be voted down.
Thank you. We're going to go to the vote now. Remember, we're voting on the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Those not in favour of the amendment, raise your hands. Any abstentions? The amendment is lost. So we go back to the original motion. I did ask if anybody wanted to speak. Nobody did. Is that still the case? Can we go straight to the vote on the original motion? Sorry? Can you, what, in general, or speak on the motion? You got any announcements to make? Hang on a minute. Councillor Pugh, I'm afraid you can't speak. You've already spoken on the original motion. Oh, we're back to the original motion now. Can we go to the vote then? Are we agreed?
Yeah, if you want to do.
Okay, would you like to sum up, Councillor Everett?
Very briefly, Chair. I think it was important that we had this debate tonight. I understand that it's going to be unsatisfactory from people who want to make the proposal that Councillor Pugh made. I think it would have been wrong for the Council not to have a discussion about the local plan. I think we're going to go on talking about the local plan. We're going to go on talking about the next local plan. I think there are things we can do constructively together to address the concerns of our residents. I absolutely hear the unease in our communities about the scale of development on agricultural land and in rural areas. I absolutely understand that sentiment. Let's deal with it in the real world. Let's not play party politics, because I think this is what you have been doing. Let's have a constructive discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Now we're going to vote on the motion. Those people for the emotion, please, for the emotion. Oh, it's Christmas soon. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. And those against, please. Here we go. And abstentions, please. The motion's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on, item 9, the Leader's report. I call upon the Leader.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping my voice is going to hold out to do this, but hopefully this item will be the last that you'll have to hear from me of any substance this evening anyway. Well, I can assure you it suits me. Can I start by wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year? I also want to congratulate Councillor Pugh and his partner on the birth of their second child in October.
All that hard work you did.
The Council still has work to do before the Christmas break, however. Cabinet next Thursday will consider some important policies and decisions, particularly around temporary accommodation. The proposal, which went to overview and scrutiny on Tuesday, is to move forward on the acquisition of 170 properties in the General Fund for use as temporary accommodation. A great deal of work has gone into this project over the last few months, which has included seeking advice from SIPFA as well as extensive financial modelling. If approved by Cabinet, the necessary borrowing will come forward as part of the 2025-26 budget for Council to agree, and each individual set of acquisitions will need to be assessed for viability and considered by overview and scrutiny before going to Cabinet like any other key decision. Nevertheless, this is a significant step for the Council, and I want to pay tribute to all the officers that have worked on this plan in housing and in finance to get it to this stage, and to the Deputy Leader, whose commitment to addressing this issue has been a significant factor. The Council currently has 300 households in temporary accommodation, nearly all of it in third-party provision, with about 160 of those placed elsewhere in Kent. We are seeking to address that in part by building and buying new council houses and using half of them for those Thanet residents in temporary accommodation. But we do need to do more to bring home those currently placed out of areas because of the disruption and damages it causes to their lives. It is the right thing to do. The cost of providing this temporary accommodation, unlike that of council housing, falls on all council taxpayers. It has spiralled in recent years, and we are having to make increasing provision for it in the budget. It means that we can do less than we would otherwise be possible to do in delivering other services which affect all of our residents. This is not just a Thanet problem, but it is one that this council needs to address. The other aspect is that for the majority of those affected who are in receipt of benefits, we will be able to reclaim the full amount of the charges we will make for that temporary accommodation. But where temporary accommodation is owned by a third party, we can only claim 90% of the 2011 local housing allowance rate, which means the council taxpayer pays the additional cost. This is not sustainable. This initiative is a significant decision for Thanet, and I was pleased to hear the cross-party support for it at overview and scrutiny. But I am also proud to lead the Labour administration that is bringing it forward. And I hope that the whole council will share our determination to bring our residents home and save money at the same time. It is not a complete solution because that would entail eliminating the need for temporary accommodation altogether, but it is a big step in the right direction. The work this Labour administration is doing to provide more affordable housing for residents who need it will be a strong legacy for this council, and we intend to do more. A white paper is set to be published next week which will set the direction of travel for the future of local government in England. It is well known that I am a supporter of the unitary model for East Kent and have been since I was first elected to this council in 2011. My understanding is that the white paper will not set out an immediate plan for reorganisation at district level in Kent. But unless that happens in due course, it risks leaving devolution half done. It risks the establishment of a strategic combined authority within which East Kent is reliant on Kent County Council for a voice. And we know from the series of issues that we currently have in Thanet, from Millmead Community Centre to Pie Factory and to Bradstow School, that we cannot rely on KCC. Neither, as a district council, can we step in to replace them. I've been involved in lengthy discussions with other leaders from across Kent, but particularly East Kent, and I think it's fair to say that any differences of opinion have not been rooted in party advantage, but on a desire to reach the right outcome for our area. Change is unsettling, however, not just for councillors but for officers. But whatever the future holds, local services will still need to be provided. It is less important which council provides them than they are done well and that public money is used efficiently. I believe Thanet District Council is delivering for residents, albeit in what has been since 2010 a difficult funding environment. But the district is under increasing pressure from cuts by KCC, over which it is hard to see local people are currently able to exert much influence. No matter how often and how loudly we tell people that KCC swallows 4/5 of council tax, or that its annual percentage increase is larger than Thanet's, we often get the blame. A system whereby the collection authority takes and spends more of the money is surely desirable, as is one where more decisions about East Kent are taken in East Kent, and not in Maidstone, by people elected in Dartford and Sevenoaks. There are also large areas of confusion about which council does what, especially around highways, which is not good for democracy. Reorganisation is a live issue that will be aired again over the coming months, none of which means that this council can take its eye off the ball. We remain responsible for overseeing the major regeneration projects in Margate and Ramsgate, and 2025 will be a critical year in their delivery, alongside so many other initiatives. At the end of November, the Council invited the public to experience a virtual reality hovercraft tour of the Ramsgate projects at Discovery Planet in the town centre, and I know that many councillors were among those who took up the opportunity. Not only was this an enlightening experience in terms of the projects, but it also showcased how technology might be used to engage more effectively with residents in future. It was particularly effective in showing how we are reimagining Harbour Parade and Pier Yard, as well as the Green Campus. And I was pleased too that it included the Newington Community Centre, which is set to be one of the first projects to be delivered in the new year. I'm also confident that it was the first time a hovercraft had ever visited Newington. I welcome the confirmation from the new government that Ramsgate will receive funding under the long-term plan for towns as previously announced, even though the scheme turned out to be another unfunded announcement by the previous government. Tourism remains at the heart of our economy, and it was hugely encouraging to see the statistics in the two-yearly report published by Visit Kent this week, which showed that 4.6 million people visited Thanet in 2023, an 18% increase on 2021 and 99% of the pre-COVID number. There were 4.1 million day trips, and the value of that tourism reached £346 million, up 65% on 2021, which reflects well on the hospitality and visitor experience that Thanet can offer, and is a tribute to the hard work of all those involved in providing it. A total of 8,257 Thanet jobs, 19% of the total in the district, are in the tourism industry. Tourism is also at the heart of our identity as a district, and we are proud of that, but we know it also brings challenges, and I welcome the work that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee did to identify ways to mitigate some of these. Cabinet recently published its detailed response to their report and identified those we can take forward. But this is a constantly evolving issue, and officers will report back to members in the spring about lessons and initiatives in relation to beach management based on experience last summer. We have to strike a balance between encouraging tourism and protecting the amenity of those of us who live here all year round. That is very much a characteristic of the parking strategy, which is also at Cabinet next week. The origin of this work lies in Councillor Crittenden's motion to Council in January 2022, but like the major housing initiatives, it had to wait for a Labour administration to be brought forward. I know that our parking Cabinet member, Councillor Christian Bright, will ensure that we don't have to wait quite as long to see the quick wins which we're promised, and I commend him for the energy and commitment he has brought to the role since being appointed earlier this year. Another long-standing issue which we progressed in the last month is the award of 50 small grants across the district from the £70,000 accumulated in the Thanet Lotto, as well as £20,000 from the Shared Prosperity Fund. These went to organisations in the voluntary community and social enterprise sector and followed on from the Shared Prosperity Fund's awards made earlier in the year. Working with Social Enterprise Kent, we're also running the Thanet Community Champions Awards, nominations for which close on December 31st. As well as recognising outstanding individuals, this is another initiative which gives us an opportunity to recognise the work being done by so many people in our community and which adds to the quality of life for so many residents, both as beneficiaries and participants. I also want to congratulate everyone who took place in the second Teenage Market, which took place in Margate on November the 30th and was a great success. The Teenage Market is a national initiative set up to champion the next generation of market traders and relies on a range of local supporters, including the council. It is an opportunity for young people to show off their creative talents as well as learn business skills. I think as the year comes to a close, we can also reflect the satisfaction on the successful reintroduction of Ramsgate Market, which has put a buzz back into the town centre on Friday mornings. Finally, Chair, I want to thank all our staff who work outside at this time of year when weather conditions can be at their most unpleasant, as they were notably last weekend. These employees are the regular public face of the council, and while they're often anonymous to councillors, we do rely on them just as much as the officers we deal with on a day-to-day basis. While many of us look forward to a Christmas break, many of these staff will be working over the extended holiday period, and their efforts should not go unacknowledged. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to the work of the council in 2024. I believe that with the temporary accommodation project, we are finishing the year on a high, and I hope you do too.
Councillor Pugh, would you like to comment on or ask questions in relation to the Leader's OUD?
I would, Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Leader for sight of the main themes or topics of his report ahead of this meeting. I know that we've changed the process for how we do that. Let's see how this goes and how much I'm able to hold the Leader over the fire in this meeting. And I also appreciate his kind words at the beginning of the meeting. It almost makes up for you shouting at me during the local plan motion. You looked a bit light on your feet. I thought you were going to pass out, Councillor Everett, so be careful. I do want you to make it... No, I'm just saying, I do want you to make it to the end of the year, contrary to popular belief. There's a lot that's been covered, so I'm going to try and be succinct and brief. The Leader gets 10 minutes for his report and took up that time. I only get 5 minutes to respond, so I'm going to try and be really quick. And now only 4, I know, this is what happens. Temporary accommodation acquisition policy. Now, I subbed on overview scrutiny early this week when this was brought forward. I'd like to thank the housing team for their work on this, because it was an incredibly comprehensive presentation and the report that was at ONS. I still have reservations, as I do, about us buying up new homes for our own council housing, about the loan agreements and paying them off, and that this is probably the worst time to try and borrow money. I still hold those reservations, but I've got to be honest, if there was ever a paramount reason for why we should be borrowing money, it should be to ensure that people who don't have a permanent home can be at least housed within the district. We've all got experiences. I think when there was, Councillor White had brought a similar motion about this 6 months ago to the council, we all have experiences as a councillor where we've either travelled far out of district to visit people who are temporarily housed, some of them up in Medway, or we've experienced it directly with residents who are temporarily housed, and we're trying out the district, we're trying to get them back into the district. Local government reorganisation. I share that much of what the leader has said about local government reorganisation. I do think that it would probably be a bit of a good Christmas present. It's before Christmas. The white paper actually had some real detail in what this reform would mean. I don't think it's sustainable with the two-tier local government that we have. It dates back to 1974. That shows you how bit of a political geek I am, in that something needs to change. And it's a shame if in the white paper it doesn't include real detail of how that will be for Kent, because if it is a combined authority leader, a combined authority for Kent, and the main avenue of that is KCC, irrespective of what political party is in control of KCC, that benefits no one. That doesn't benefit us, that doesn't benefit anyone in West Kent or Medway or anywhere. I think it would be pointless. The leader has mentioned a few things I'm going to try and take together, so it's going to be quite hard. Tourism numbers. It's welcome news that we're starting to return to a level that we last saw just before COVID, although of course that's for 2023 and it takes a while for us to get all the data. It's welcome news about the long-term plan for towns. Of course, that was announced under the previous government, as the leader has said, and similar with the Margate teenage market and the success of that, because it's fantastic that we're seeing initiatives like that are bringing more footfall into our town centres, not only to support teenagers and the businesses that they set up, but actually to get people back into the town centres, shopping and spending their money. The questions that I do have in relation to all of that is that whilst this is great news, the government has announced the High Street Rental Auctions Programme, which is a facility where local authorities will be able to run auctions for businesses to then take over leases of empty vacant shop units in big town centre locations. We've got massive prime examples of big retail units in our town centres that are sitting vacant. The New Look building in Ramsgate is a prime example, and it's something that we tried to do something with the Future High Streets Fund when the Conservatives were in control, and we weren't able to do anything about it because the landlord is still getting paid rent by New Look, and if they lease that out to anyone else, they lose that money. So that will sit vacant until that lease expires, which is incredibly frustrating for all of us that want to see our town centres alive again. My question to the leader is that considering, particularly across the district, but in Thanet, the vacancy rates in Ramsgate, particularly in Ramsgate, is at an all-time high, and I think it's 1 in 4. There was a recent Kent media article on it. Is that why is it that Ramsgate or Thanet, as a district, isn't one of those local authorities that is going to be trialling this and is going to be one of the first to try and do something about it? Because I think it would have a real positive impact on our town centres. Similar, I welcome what the leader has said about the Ramsgate Regen virtual reality tour. But unfortunately, and I ask this question, or a similar question to this, every time we have full council, is that, and apologies Chair, I will finish, every time we have full council is that it's all well and good talking about levelling up and the regeneration funding and everything that's coming into the town, whether it be the town deal or the 2 levelling up funds. But we get the same thing over and over again, particularly about the Ramsgate levelling up funds, is that when are things going to be delivered? Things are being cut and cut and cut. It's all good doing a Ramsgate Regen virtual reality tour and a hovercraft going over Newington, which I'm sure if that was in real life, a lot of residents would be quite surprised. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, nothing's really happening. Okay, fine, there may be a race ahead against time to kind of allocate the spending before time runs out. But actually, as inflation bites, less and less money is going to be, the power parity of the money that we've got allocated is losing its power. You know, we've got the Ramsgate fishermen have been shafted for their funding, and from what I hear, the £100,000 that they've been offered, it looks like they won't even be getting that to do anything with. So when are we going to see some real updates? When are we going to see some real change? Because if we're not careful, the Green Campus will just be one wooden shed that you can get from B&Q or Homebase, and not much else. Homebase gone bust. It's great news that there's an opportunity for people to be nominated for community champions. I won't expect the leader to put me forward and nominate me as a community champion, unfortunately. But what I would say, and this is something that wasn't in the subheadings of the leader's report, so I suppose we're going to have to try and revisit this strategy, is about the parking review and the strategy. I welcome Councillor Bright's bringing the parking strategy and the review to open your scrutiny. I think it was a very good discussion, it was a very good debate. It's not about party politics or being tribal or anything like that.
Councillor Pugh.
Sorry,
yes.
Chair, I just want to quickly make, I do think it's a cheap shot to say that although the motion was brought in by Councillor Christensen, the former Cabinet member responsible for that, Councillor David Saunders, worked incredibly hard to try and get parking review introduced whilst we were in control of the council. Now, councillors cannot draft and submit their own reports to cabinet or council. If we could have done, then that would have been initiated whilst we were in control. So I don't think that's very ingenuous. I think it's quite disingenuous to put forward that cheap shot. But apart from that, Chair, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And maybe I'll be downstairs for a mince pie afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. I would remind you, though, the invite was from me. Call upon the leader to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. I think that the new approach to sharing the leader's report will take a while to bed in. I would recognise probably it wasn't completely wonderful this time round. One of the problems I have as a former journalist is I can only work to deadlines, and if you move my deadline back, then I produce the copy later. This is why you didn't get a full summary of what was going forward. But we will work on that and make sure that it works for opposition leaders. Reservations about the borrowing. Well, we're not going to be borrowing now. Borrowing will only come forward as and when it's needed, and I think we recognise this isn't the best time for borrowing, and I have every confidence in our Treasury management and in our finance officers to make the right decisions along that. Members will be able to see on an individual basis each tranche of properties that are bought and what the viability assessment is, so we can make our judgments then. I think we pretty much agree on local government reorganisation. If you're a real geek about these things, you'd know the names of all the councils which formed the Thanet district in 1974. I do, we can talk about that later. Okay, maybe over a mince pie. Yeah, we are very interested in the leases of empty shops, but as you rightly highlight, there are lots of challenges involved in that. I know that Polly Billington MP, don't make this as a political point, she is very interested in this. She's been talking to people in Ramsgate about it, and we want to work on that with her. Well, whether the progress on the regeneration projects, I don't think you can honestly say that they've slowed down since the Labour administration came in 2023. These things have taken a long while to build up. We are very close to delivering Newington Community Centre and Broad Street, as I think you know. There is an awful lot happening in the background. I'm very confident that 2025 will be a year in which we'll see plenty of delivery. And I don't know where you got the idea that the 100,000 which was notionally allocated to the fishermen is going to be taken away. I think you've been talking to the wrong people again, because I haven't heard that, and I'm in charge. Yeah. I think that was everything. Thank you.
Councillor Garner, would you like to comment on or ask questions in relation to the leader's report?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I'll start by congratulating Councillor Pugh and his wife on the birth of their second child. I hadn't realised. Those of us of a certain vintage, now that we've got a Pugh and a Pew, will be looking forward to a Barney McGrew coming from somewhere. Always predictable. So, secondly, I'd like to thank the leader for giving us early sight of the topics he was thinking of covering on Saturday. I didn't check back on the list of topics, as he added topics to that initial 4, so I've got a response on that initial 4. Firstly, the recent Ramsgate Regeneration Virtual Reality Tour, which, although I wasn't able to attend myself, I have received positive feedback from my colleagues here who did. They tell me it was a really good experience, offering the chance to visualise a lot of what's coming. There are, however, a few things that are needed following on from this. The first is a much better idea of the delivery plan. What can we expect to happen when? The plan that was displayed at the event gave very little detail of this, I'm told. The second thing is a better understanding of what's happening to those projects that have fallen out of the programme, like the Smack Boys building and, of course, the fisheries proposal. We'd appreciate an update on them, please. And there was one, I'm told, there was one major element that wasn't included in the virtual tour, and that is the ferry terminal and negotiations to find an operator. Although I wouldn't expect virtual reality negotiations. When will we be getting a substantive update on this, please? Moving on to the publication next week of the devolution white paper, which should be the chance of a generation to recreate local government. Unfortunately, there's a serious risk that if these changes are rushed through without sufficient thought and consultation, they will lead to chaos. There are no short-term fixes to the financial crisis affecting many authorities like Kent County Council. Merging district council reserves into a potential new set of unitary authorities to spend on sentient children's services for a couple of years before they run out would just be delaying the inevitable. I think we all know that, and I share the leader's agreement that an East Kent unitary authority would be a good thing. I think we all know that that might be a better way of delivering services to our residents. The new authorities will need to be properly funded. Many of us here over the last few years have lambasted previous governments for their austerity-related cuts in our funding, which have led to service cuts at both district and county levels. Along with the new local authority structures, that funding needs to be restored. Regarding the temporary accommodation acquisition policy, as Councillor Austin and myself made clear to you and Councillor Whitehead earlier this week, and as Councillors Austin and Wing made clear at Tuesday evening's overview and scrutiny meeting, we support the plans to purchase up to 170 new homes for use as temporary accommodation for our residents. While it's of course important that these plans are financially viable and the initial financial outlay is large, the human cost of not doing this is much more far-reaching. Children having to move far away from their schools and friends, adults having to move away from their work, and families having to move far away from their extended families and wider support networks. We congratulate Councillor Whitehead and the housing team for bringing this plan forward. Longer term, of course, as a country, we need to do more to prevent the need for having so much temporary accommodation by regulating the rental market to reduce the number of no-fault evictions, and also by increasing the number of council homes being provided through government intervention to make sure a much higher percentage of the homes that are being built are affordable homes, and also by government funding councils to provide sustainable council homes themselves. But finally, as well as not being able to attend the Ramsgate Regeneration virtual tour, I was unable to attend the Teenage Market in Margate, as it clashed with our own Broadstairs and St Peter's Christmas Market at Piermont Hall. What a great idea, though, to create a platform for young people from across Thanet to sell their creations and make connections with their community. I'm nearly finished. I know Councillor Packman and Karen Brinkman, who was an integral part of the team making it happen, are really pleased with how it went, and I congratulate everyone involved in its success. There have been a number of excellent Christmas events taking place right across the district, bringing communities together and raising funds for some excellent causes, which I believe is when we see Thanet and our people at its best. So I'd just like to finish by wishing everyone here and out there a Merry Christmas, and also wishing for a Happy New Year that's filled with kindness, compassion and hope for all of us. Thank you.
Leader, would you like to respond?
Yes, I don't think, Councillor Garner, that the purpose of the virtual reality tour was to provide new information. It was really to enable the public in particular to gain a better understanding of what was being proposed. And I think I was particularly struck how it did that in relation to Harbour Parade and Pier Yard, because you could see them, how they might evolve in front of you. Now, of course, we've got to turn that into reality, not just virtual reality, but I thought that was quite exciting. I absolutely understand that people would like to know more about what's going on with the pool. What I can say to you is that when we made the Cabinet decision to go down this process, we set out a timetable. We're still on that timetable. So if you follow the timetable, then you'll work out where we're going. I mean, there's a lot I could say about all the various projects, but I don't think I've probably got time this evening. There's a huge amount going on. Some of it is pretty dry. It's about planning applications. It's about tender processes being ongoing. I'm sure in the new year that there will be a thorough briefing. I know that the head of regeneration is always anxious to come and talk to members about all the projects, and I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to do that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on now. Report of the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief because time's going on. My full report has been circulated to members in this evening's meeting's agenda pack. As usual, it's been a busy time for overview and scrutiny with some long agendas, and I'd like to give thanks to all my members of scrutiny who have continued to meet regularly. And also thanks to them for the support that they've given me throughout the year, and of course support from Democratic Services with Nick and Charles and Ingrid and her legal team too. We've recently had 2 of our scrutiny reviews passed by Cabinet. One of it was our nationally critiqued review on the negative impacts of tourism, and the most recent one looking at the external grant funding and how we interact with our voluntary organisations. We look forward to seeing the recommendations from those put into practice soon. We have a new scrutiny review recently underway looking at youth provision in Thanet, led by Councillor Joanne Bright, and we look forward to hearing about that one in due course. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any comments.
Thank you. Do councillors have any comments? No, thank you. Okay, mid-year review 2024 to 2025, Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy. I call upon Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. This report summarises Treasury Management activity and prudential indicators at midpoint 24-25. Part of the Treasury Management operation is to ensure that cash flow is adequately planned, with surplus monies being invested in low-risk counterparties, providing adequate liquidity initially before considering optimising investment return. The second main function of the Treasury Management Service is the funding of the Council's capital plans. These capital plans provide a guide to the borrowing needs of the Council, essentially the longer-term cash flow planning to ensure the Council can meet its capital spending operations. This management of longer-term cash may involve arranging long or short-term loans, or using longer-term cash flow surpluses, and on occasion any debt previously drawn may be restructured to meet Council risk or cost objectives. I can confirm that the approved limits within the annual investment strategy were not breached during the first 6 months of 24-25. There is one proposed change to the previously agreed Treasury Management strategy, and that is set out in section 3.2 of this report. This change is that both the operational boundary and the authorised limit for borrowing may be increased by £3 million to reflect the increase in the capital programme, as per the Council report on the 10th of October 2024 on the medium-term temporary accommodation plan. I move the recommendations.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane, thank you. Do councillors agree? Agree. Thank you. Council appointed outside bodies. Call upon Councillor Everett. Sorry.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
The annex, which explains some of the terminology and so on, is really helpful, but I'm wondering if we might at some point with Treasury reports get a glossary, like we do with housing these days, because having to keep looking back at definitions of things is really makes it hard to follow for those of us who aren't finance people. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I've just looked over the relevant officers and they're happy to look into that, so we'll come back to you on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Do councillors still agree? Thank you. Council appointed outside bodies. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. This report invites Council to agree an additional nomination to the River Stour Internal Drainage Board, I think is its proper title, and the appointment of a member of Council to serve on that non-executive appointed outside body. I am proposing Councillor Joanne Bright to be the Council's second nominee on the River Stour Drainage Board. I've also had a request from Councillor Keane that she be removed from the Multiple Sclerosis Society as the Council's nominee, so I'm proposing that as well.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Will Scobie. Thank you. Anyone got any comments about this? Okay, we'll go straight to the vote. Do you agree? Thank you. Amendments to the Constitution Policy Framework. I move that the recommendations as set out in the report be adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do councillors agree? Thank you. Amendments to Councillors' Code of Conduct. I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Bright.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as possible, and hopefully I won't get as excited about this one. I wanted just to make sure that this just didn't go through the nod, because I wanted to make sure that everyone in the chamber understands what we're talking about here, because this stuff is important, how we behave in the chamber and externally as well, online, for example. I work, and I have worked for the last 20 years in multinational corporations, and I've been at partner level for the last 10, 15. We undertake mandatory training, we have awareness of equality, etc. all the time. You never know it all. It's always worth going along and learning something. Not only that though, it signals allyship. So we are in effect in this chamber non-exec directors of a big employer in Thanet. If you are a member of if you have a protected characteristic and you work for this authority, then not just your senior leadership team, but councillors, the way they behave makes a difference to how you are perceived and to how comfortable you feel in all things. And I think it's really important because I can only imagine the horror how it felt to have been a woman or girl in the summer when members of this chamber thought it was a good idea to involve the Free Speech Union in an attempt to embarrass this council when we were trying to combat the harassment of women and girls and foul and abusive language on our streets. So before we go through and just agree to this code of conduct, I wanted to open the floor and make sure that any councillors, any members here who don't agree with the code of conduct get the opportunity to make their feelings clear in public rather than on their Facebook pages, and that I don't really want to wake up in the morning seeing a Daily Express headline of snowflake councillors demanding respect or woke council demands equalities training on the cover of the Daily Express. So I just thought that I'm really happy to be voting for this, and I would welcome hearing any councillors make a case for not supporting it.
Thank you. Well, on account of that, I will ask the question again. Okay, Councillor Pugh.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't going to say anything. I thought that we could just nod this through because I thought it was all very obvious and it was common sense that needed to be used into it. I thank Councillor Bright for his comments. I don't agree with any of them because he's just used it as an opportunity to try and attack people, and the whole point of inserting this word respect into the code of conduct. I mean, Councillor Bright, I'm sorry, but you know, to come from you about respect, you probably try to goad the Conservative group in full council meetings more than anyone else on your side. I mean, so I find it just laughable. We had a motion brought forward by Councillor Whitehead some time ago about respect and about how we all treat each other and stuff like that. And I've said it since then. I had the right to reply, as the leader gave me the right to reply, and I said I completely agreed, and I said we need to be more informed and careful about how we talk to each other, because there are instances in this chamber where things are getting quite nasty and quite personal, and I've got to be honest, I don't understand why it needs to be. We can disagree on policy and we can disagree on what we want to achieve for the best of our residents, but I think we can all agree that we all really care And I don't want to upset anyone's feelings in here. I don't want anyone to feel disrespected. I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. I think we should all feel comfortable in sharing our views and what we really believe in. But Councillor Bright's comments have just, again, he's just used it as an opportunity to try and attack councillors in this chamber who were concerned that maybe the route of action that was taken was not the appropriate one. Now, we can talk about the Free Speech Union all we want. I'm not going to try and defend them. That's not my job to do. But, you know, again, if raising some concerns about something that you're not really happy about means that actually, you know, you don't respect women and you don't care about communities and stuff like that. You know, Councillor Bright, you're just trying to do a lot of the bear baiting that we see all the time. You know, you're not trying to bring everyone together. So I'm disappointed. I didn't want to have to comment on this. I thought it was very obvious. But clearly I have. But I support it. Let's get it in there. But again, let's act on it. And let's all actually respect each other, because there's no point councillors bringing forward motions or inserting this into the code of conduct if we don't actually follow through on it. I think it's pointless, isn't it, otherwise?
Thank you. I've actually made a note in the meeting before this meeting. I made a note and I've written down, can we please stay respectful whilst talking about respect? So, and I think we've done that hitherto. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've just summed up what I was going to say. I find it quite ironic that one of the people who've got the most to say criticising others finds it necessary to grandstand, but then I guess if you're in media, minutes on camera count. Maybe that's it, who knows. I'm pleased to say that we don't seem to have a respect issue within this chamber. Within limits, we all do respectfully to each other. We are all signed up to a code of conduct and we respect the law which requires that. I think my colleague Councillor Rees has addressed the clear lack of comprehension of certain cabinet members of the other side, because they didn't, it's nothing to do with women, children or people's rights. It was to do with a financial and legal threat to the council, which is why the challenge was actually accepted. And before we get political on that, I'd also like to point out that the 24 legal advisors to the Free Speech Union include the former DPP who followed their glorious current leader. So it's in no way political, and it was done for the best interests of all, which is what we are here to do for everyone. And I think a little less rhetoric and a little more action from certain people might go down well. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'd like to thank my Councillor Joanne Bright and Councillor Matterface for actually attending the new Equality CAG. It was quite disappointing that we didn't have any men on that CAG for a change. And I have to say that I sit here as a teacher, and some of the behaviours I witness in politics are absolutely shocking. And I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of people have turned away from politics. I can sit here and tell you that I've had members in this room use these phrases to me. It's just politics, and you need to toughen up, as if I'm the problem. And I'm absolutely certain that my behaviour hasn't been totally okay here in this room. But it starts here and now. This is where it starts, here and now. And as a group that sits here and sometimes has to listen to what's going on between the two main groups, it's really frustrating when what you actually want to do is hear what other people have got to say and have your opportunity to speak as well. So maybe the new year we can start with this new policy of equality and respecting each other by not goading each other. I find it quite offensive when one group says, well, this group didn't do that. It makes the assumption that we're all thick. We all know why we're in this situation. We don't need to be reminded. We're in a situation, and it's our responsibility to work together and work responsibly with each other to get ourselves out of whatever mess we're in. So I welcome the equality and diversity policy. It's a long time coming. I remember when I got elected in 2019, I couldn't believe we had no safeguarding training and no equality and diversity training. It's standard and mandatory in most forms of employment and most workplaces now. So why shouldn't it be here?
Thank you. Councillor Wilscoby.
The mince pies are calling, Chair, so I'll try and be brief. But I have to point out there's a slight. I feel like I'm having a bit of an out-of-body experience, really, on two aspects. The first one is I've had 2 weeks of actually agreeing with Councillor Davis on various matters at GNA, reviewing scrutiny, and I'm so glad that we disagree on this, because I was getting a bit worried about myself. Is he moving left? Am I moving right? Who knows? I just wanted to respond to Councillor Pugh standing up and going, well, of course we all agree. Well, I can go through on the nod. What is Councillor Bright talking about? Was anybody else there at the Constitutional Review meeting 3 weeks ago where Councillor Davis, a member of your group, insisted this was Orwellian and an outrage and you'll never get me at equalities training and all sorts of other things, joined by Councillor Worrow? And I'll quite happily name Councillor Davis if he wants to respond.
No, that's not a point of order.
No, I named him, so I think that's fair.
And naming someone isn't a point of order.
No, I wasn't. I was misquoted. I never said I wouldn't attend equalities training.
I accept that. You may have not said those exact words, but I think the fire and brimstone was certainly there. And
I had certain points, but I never said I wouldn't attend.
Described as Orwellian. So I think slightly disingenuous, Councillor Pugh, because I think you were at that meeting to say you may not want to accept that there's divisions in your group and some of your members tend to go off on slightly right-wing rants occasionally, but that is why I think Councillor Bright was raising that point. So I just wanted to add that additional detail, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Keane, sorry.
Thank you, and I will be quick, but I'm very pleased to see how much support there is for the equalities. As the head of the Equalities CAG, then I didn't realise there was so much support for it. What I would like to say, as Councillor Wing has pointed out, that it's a small group and it's all female, so if anyone else would like to come and join and give a wider view within the group, I would very much welcome that. Please speak to me.
Thank you. Okay, so can I ask the question? I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted. Councillor Whitehead, last one.
Thank you, Chair. I think the important thing is the actions that come from this. And I'm not going to take up time, but to echo one of Councillor Pugh's references, I did bring a motion about this, or issues related to this, that was very well supported in the Chamber. Before I did this, and after that I did this, public behaviour in terms of the use of social media completely undermined what had seemingly been public support. So I think there is an important reference within what Councillor Bright said, in that if you are going to behave in that way in a public forum and on social media, you need to acknowledge that when we are doing this in the Chamber and when we are talking about these issues, you are being held to what we discuss. It's the actions that come from this that are important. And so, to read through the recommendations, firstly, to amend the Councillors' Code of Conduct to include as a general obligation the requirement to treat councillors, officers and members of the public with respect. Secondly, to amend the Councillors' Code of Conduct to include as a general obligation the requirement to promote equalities and not discriminate unlawfully against any person. I don't think that there is anyone in here who disagrees with that, and it's encouraging to see the level of support that there is. But I want to be certain that these become actions rather than words. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. So I'm going to ask you again that the recommendations as set out in the report be adopted. Do the councillors agree? Agree. Thank you. Okay, before I conclude the business closed for this meeting, I would like to wish all the members of the council and the 2, maybe 3 members of the public gallery who've just sat this out all night long. Well done to you. A very Merry Christmas and a happy and productive New Year. Please do join us downstairs for a drink. Good night, everyone.